Good evening. It's good to see everybody. I think it's about time to start. First song tonight is going to be Count Your Blessings. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to dare? Every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings, money cannot buy. Your reward in heaven, your home on high. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done.
Yes. Okay. Nope, we're at the end. We need to be back at the beginning. All right. So tonight, devotional / invitational is entitled The Substitute. And for most of us in our educational lives, we've encountered substitute teachers. Those are usually the ones that we sometimes look forward to. Sort of like going to your grandparents where you can get away with things, right? This teacher may not know what some of the classroom rules are or what, you're studying at a particular moment, or maybe you can convince the substitute, for example, that, every Thursday we have a film day or something of the nature, right? Whatever you can get away with. I'm going to share with you three individuals. This is George Templeton Strong. He was an American lawyer, musician, diarist, anti-slavery abolitionist who thought that slavery was morally wrong, contributed a lot of writings at the time in America to contribute to the social and political unrest in the United States in the late 1850s and 1860s. This gentleman was Grover Cleveland, 22nd and the 24th President of the United States. He was the first Democrat elected after the end of the Civil War, and was also the first president to have non-consecutive terms, something we didn't see until our current president. Then this is John D. Rockefeller. Now, most of us have heard of Rockefeller or the Rockefeller family. John D. Rockefeller was American businessman and philanthropist, was also really the person who brought the oil industry together and into the 19th and 20th century. He was the founder of Standard Oil Company. He was the richest man at the time and one of the richest men in history. Deeply religious. He was a Northern Baptist as opposed to a Southern Baptist, believed in temperance and was a prominent abolitionist. Now, why do I share these three figures with you? Each and every one of these men at the outset of the Civil War hired a substitute. Hired a substitute to go to war for them. Okay? This was a practice that was prevalent starting with the Revolutionary War in America and was finally abolished with the Selective Service Act in 1973. So these men paid people to go to war for them during the Civil War. Now just imagine you're a prominent abolitionist like our gentleman here, Mr. Strong, or maybe John D. Rockefeller, who certainly was an abolitionist as well, and you're espousing the virtues of opposing slavery, quite natural, and yet you're not willing to go fight for it, which is kind of interesting. And I bring all of this up because in our Christian walk, we can have substitutes. We have people in churches in Christendom across the world that frankly, maybe in the family, it is the wife or the mother that attends church. And the men don't. The men stay home. The men would rather watch football or whatever. And it's the women of the family that regularly attend church, right? We might have a substitute in the form of our children's sporting events that cause us to miss church. We might, in my case as an example, have a hobby that we're very, very passionate about, that we enjoy doing, and we might let that get in the way, right? The point here is, we know from the Bible, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is the God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. So the lesson here is, as Christians, there's nobody that can substitute for us. You cannot send or pay a substitute for your salvation, as people did in times of old for war. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjugation, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. 1 Corinthians 9:27. You're going to detect the theme in these scriptures. Not everyone that said to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of my Father which is in heaven. Matthew 24:13, the one who endures to the end will be saved. And Philippians 3:14, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God and Christ Jesus. And finally, I have fought the good fight, I finished my course, I have kept the faith, 2 Timothy 4:7. The theme throughout this is the individual responsibility that each and every Christian has to their walk. There's nobody that can substitute for you. There's nobody that can go in your stead. There is nothing on this earth you can substitute that's going to get you there. So tonight, if you find yourself in that situation where maybe you've looked to substitute other things, or you know friends, family members who have, certainly talk to them, certainly engage with them. It's important that we take ownership of our own salvation. And if you're not a Christian, let me give you a little spoiler alert. There is no substitute for Jesus Christ. So with that, whatever your need is, come forward as to now we stand and sing.
The voice of Jesus, Lord, the cross where He dies inside. He now at the cross there is room. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to the Father and thrones from mercy's most wonderful height? His love in that call He outpours. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The voices of loved ones entreat. You know in your heart they are right. Then lips for the moments are free. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The voices of friends gone before sing floating from regions of light. They tenderly say, o'er and o'er, are you coming to Jesus tonight? Oh, who to himself will be true, of all whom these voices invite, who answers, my brother, to you? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The bride and the Spirit in night. Are you coming to Jesus tonight?
So I was able to catch up with William at the beginning of the week, and obviously he and Madison made it back in town. But the good news is his dad made it home from the hospital, and he is continuing to do well with his recovery from open heart surgery. Sister Lisa England had a checkup today with her surgeon, and she was released at least from him. Obviously, there's still some restrictions, but she's going to be able to drive, and Lord willing, she'll be able to be with us on Sunday if she feels up to it. But she got a very favorable report from her surgeon today, and that's great. And then monthly musical movie night on Friday. They're going to watch a musical every month, and this Friday is the first one. And I know a lot of you have heard about it, been invited to it. Going to have a good crowd. going to have dinner, watch a movie, and that'll be a good time to be together. I asked Joshua if he would to say a prayer for us. And so Joshua, who I think is coming from work by the looks of it, that's a fine-looking fella, isn't it? He's going to say a prayer, and then we'll be dismissed to our Bible classes. Thank you, Joshua.
Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this time we have to come together midweek to refocus our minds on you, and Lord, to have fellowship with one another, to sing songs of praises to you, and Lord, just to be in the company of one another. Lord, I pray that we don't take this time for granted. I pray that we can go to our respective classes, learn more about you, God, but not only learn it, but understand it and apply it to our lives. And Lord, please be with those on our prayer list. Lord, you know what their needs are, and I pray that you can be with them, you can heal them, you can restore them, whatever their needs may be, physical or mental. Lord, bless this evening tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, let's open up to Ezra, and we will keep moving on our study of Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job. So last week, man, we had to book it last week, and pretty much all we had time for was me at like 2x speed to spew the story of Ezra at you. And so that's what we did, because it's all we had time for. But kind of refresh some of that, and if there were any comments or any thoughts about it as we just emphasize the narrative, the story, the way it happened, should have time for those tonight. And then we'll move on to some of the other stuff that's going on in Ezra 7 through 10. Ezra, this section that deals with Ezra specifically begins in chapter 7. You'll notice that right out of the gate, Ezra is, we're given some timeline of when Ezra takes place. And since, our knowledge of Persian kings and their reign is so crystal clear, we know exactly what that means. But in a much more real sense, I had no idea what that means. And so that's a clue. It gives you a king's reign. It gives you a king's, like, who was in charge. It lets you know about this much time has passed. In this case, Ezra comes about 50 years after Zerubbabel and Shealtiel, who showed up and rebuilt the temple. So the temple was rebuilt, and you remember they ended that with a big Passover feast, and then Ezra happens. So that's where we're at, 50 years later. What was 50 years ago? Like 70, 75? Was it 75? Is that 50 years ago? Yeah, okay. So 75 was like 50 years ago. I'm just saying there's a lot that goes on from 75 to 2025. Therefore, it stands to reason it might have looked a lot different. Like, we have a tendency to sort of read these, void of reality and what was actually going on. 50 years from, good grief, Zerubbabel. I keep wanting to call Zerubbabel Ezra. 50 years from Zerubbabel, Ezra actually shows up. And so a lot's taken place. You've got generations that have passed. You've got people who have gotten more set in their ways, who have gotten more comfortable being back in the land. The temple is no longer freshly rebuilt, right? Buildings that are 50 years old have a tendency to be older, not newer. And so the excitement from that has potentially faded away. That's when Ezra steps into action. We're given a genealogy here that we're going to look at in a little bit, but after this, you get a decree from Artaxerxes. It's very reminiscent of the decree from Cyrus in chapter 1, where he just says, I want you to go back. I want you to take care of business, like restore the law, bring some people back with you and fill the temple with the vessels that they're supposed to have. And so Artaxerxes sends Ezra, and Ezra's on his way. Then there's this genealogy, and there are a lot of names. When you get to chapter 8, Ezra throws a big pause, and he sends for some Levites. They're on their way, and then he says, wait a minute, we need Levites. So they go back, they get some Levites, and they continue their journey. They have a fast and a time of prayer, because Ezra says he does not want, he doesn't want to ask for help from kings of the nations, because he already told the king that our God's going to take care of us. And so he prays to God, please take care of us. Like, back me up here. I vouched for you, now have my back and protect us. And so he prays for deliverance. Then there's this 3-day rest that they have. At the end of, at the end of chapter 8, they have this 3-day rest. And then you have chapter 9, which is where the controversy comes up. The officials show up to Ezra and they say, oh, Ezra, we have really done it this time. We have really messed up. It's over with, honestly. We've married foreign wives. And Ezra is brokenhearted about this. I mean, the rest of chapter 9 is Ezra praying to God and telling him, I think I have a splinter or something, and it hurts to rub up on. This is driving me crazy. That's where I always put my hand. I'm going to have to go up here this time. Ezra is brokenhearted, and he prays to God, and he's just like, listen, I can't believe we've done this. We're not faithful to you, but you're faithful to us, and we as a people are guilty of this. And then chapter 10, you get this idea. They have this idea. What are we going to do about this, right? This is a problem. We all feel like this is a problem. They've married these people of the land, and we've intermarried, and so now what are we going to do? Well, they end up coming up with a council, and they basically say, hey, everybody get over here, right? And if you don't show up, you're going to be kicked out. You either come to this meeting or you're no longer a part of the nation. And everyone shows up, and this guy, Shechaniah, pipes up in the meeting, and he says, hey, why don't we just all divorce our foreign wives? Let's just do that. And Ezra's like, okay. And so they do. That's what they decide. And then they have this other second meeting, and they're like, well, we got to figure out who has actually married foreign wives and who hasn't. So then they say, everyone needs to get here. And I'm sorry, this is the part where they say, you need to show up or else you're kicked out. The first meeting was everyone came together because of the problem. And this second meeting where they had to parse out who is and isn't married, that was the threat was show up. We'll figure out if your marriage is legit, and then if not, we'll kick you out. And then they do this. The people are like, well, we can't all do this right now. There's rain, right? We need to form a committee because there's this rain going on, and it's a really big job. Like, we're in, we hear you, we agree with this plan, but let's have somebody else do this for us because it's raining. The rain was such a weird deterrent for them. So there are a couple of people who oppose this idea, but they don't ultimately have their way, and it doesn't actually seem like they are even a very big voice, although Ezra felt the need to include that they disagreed. Only 2 people opposed. Then it mentions that it took about 3 months to get through all the people, and there were some priests at the end who pledged to put away their wives, their foreign wives, there in verse 18. Excuse me. And then the entire rest of the book, not just the chapter, but this is the last chapter, is here are the people, and it lists all these names. And then at the very end, in verse 44, the book ends with, all these had married foreign women, and some of the women had even borne children. And there's a variant there. It could mean, and they put them away with their children. The implication or the meaning there is a little bit vague, but the point is that this wasn't just like, okay, no one was affected by this. There were women and children who were both a part of or affected by what was going on. And so that's the story of Ezra. It's a very strange story of restoration and excitement, and a guy, Ezra, who is definitely depicted in a very positive light. I mean, he is, from the beginning, the hero. Like, he is the guy. But then there's this problem, and what's interesting is Ezra doesn't actually seem to be the solution to the problem at any point. Shechaniah comes up with the idea. They essentially get everyone together to figure it out. Ezra doesn't seem to be the guy who's appointed to, judge the people. He just says a prayer in chapter 9, and then he doesn't do anything else. And that's kind of an interesting detail. Also, the number of genealogies in this section are significant. Again, we saw that in chapters 1 through 6 with Zerubbabel, that there was some emphasis on genealogies, but then you've got this second section, and it almost seems like there's even more names with even, I don't want to say less meaning. There's never less meaning, but seemingly less meaning behind them. It seems a little bit more, difficult to understand why we need a list of every person who had married a foreign wife. What's the purpose of this? Was this public shaming? Was this, we need a record so we know who actually got divorced? What was the meaning of this last genealogy, and why is that how Ezra decides to end the whole book? And all these were married to foreign women in the end. It's a very, very, almost anticlimactic ending to this story that we're given. Anyway, that's the story. Are there any thoughts on that? Yeah, Chad.
Interesting that you mentioned 75 years, because that's like a whole generation of people, right? So the people who were, the old people who remembered the first temple are gone by this point.
Yeah.
Probably most people who rebuilt the temple are gone by this point. And these are like at least their children, if not their grandchildren, that are having this issue now.
Yeah, that's a great point. 50 years, you're dealing with a whole new group of people. It almost makes you wonder, would Zerubbabel and Ezra have even known each other? They might not even have known who each other were in captivity. And then maybe Ezra knows about Zerubbabel because he led that charge, but they weren't contemporaries. They weren't peers. And that's a great thought. 50 years is a long time for people to turn over. Yeah, Tim.
Well, I didn't think about this until just now, but this kind of echoes, again, the stories of the judges, though, too, right? Because you have a prominent person, that kind of sets things right, and then you have this time span where people forget.
Yeah.
And then now you have another person who's going to be setting things right in the lifespan of a generation.
That is interesting. I had not thought of that, but I definitely see, maybe, right? Maybe, because I see the pattern I see the pattern, and I now have to go look at it, because if every leader starts something but it ends a little bit worse, that would be extremely reminiscent of the judges. And that kind of thing pops up all over the place. So note, that's going to be something to look at for sure. Katie Crash.
It's also, been 50 years since the temple's been rebuilt, so it's not like they went to rebuild the temple and they're like, oh, by the way, we also have this problem. These are people who would have gotten married to these foreign wives after the temple was built.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, even as they're rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the law, a lot of the temple itself has been rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they haven't figured out really how to follow the law, because they were still marrying and doing this up
Sure.
to at least up to 50 years after.
Yeah, this isn't like, we showed up and there were these people there and they were intermarried, but we got them sorted out when we built the temple. Clearly there was something going on that the temple did not prevent people from intermarrying. Okay, so that's a really good point. Who were these people that they were frustrated with for having intermarried? Was it Ezra's people? Was it Zerubbabel's people? Was it people who were there before Zerubbabel? And I think probably a mix of these latter two, possibly. a mix of all three. But that's a really good point. That question of who are these people is really going to be significant, I think. Any other thoughts on just the story, things that stood out, fun things that you wanted to point out? No? All right. Well, any other comments as we keep going will be, of course, welcomed. Let's start right in the beginning of this part with Ezra. Look at how he's depicted in right at the beginning, chapter 7. We're going to read through probably through verse 6. All right, chapter 7, verse 1 says, "Now, after this, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Berioth, oh goodness, son of Zariah, son of Uzziah, son of Bukai, son of Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. This Ezra went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe, skilled in the law of Moses, that the Lord God of Israel had given, and the king granted him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was on him." All right, just right off the gate, right out of the gate, what do we think about Ezra as a person? Good guy, bad guy? Right, that's one of the details that's really important. He is the kind of person that knows God's law.
That has come through a line that has stayed true.
Sure,
To
he's
God.
he's in the priestly lineage, which is really significant.
Because not every part of the priestly lineage stayed true to the word.
Yeah, sure, and the fact that he can actually trace his lineage back to Aaron, I think, is going to be really significant too. He's skilled in the law of Moses. He's a part of this priestly lineage. There's a kind of a cool thing going on with this genealogy. It is a chiasm. This is the way that I learned it. I need to go back and probably see if I can find these names back in the law. But from what I understand, Ezra is depicted here as being obviously anchored in this priesthood following the lineage of Aaron. The way this goes is you have Ezra on one end, you have Aaron on the other end. When you go in a level, you have 7 priests from after the destruction of the temple, and you have 7 priests from before the destruction of the temple. And the center name is Azariah. He is credited as being the first priest in Solomon's temple, Azariah. So that would have been, he's a really significant character. So who was Aaron in terms of priests? What was significant about Aaron? He was the first priest of Israel, right? Okay, so then Azariah in the middle would be the first priest of the first temple. And then we have Ezra, who is at least being portrayed as the first priest of the second temple, right? So there's a significance that that Ezra is going to have, that Azariah had before him, and that he's being ultimately anchored in the significance of Aaron and his being the first priest. The other cool thing is Ezra and Azariah are actually the same name with one little tiny difference. Ezra and Azariah are the same name. The only difference is the Yah at the end of Azariah's name. In Hebrew, they're the same name, and then Azariah has a Yah at the end, which is Yahweh. So I believe Ezra means helper, and then Azariah is help from the Lord or something to that effect. But the only difference is Azariah is tagged to, has Yahweh's name at the end of it, and Ezra does not, which again points to this idea that Ezra is coming with all of the credentials. He is coming with all of the significance. He is exactly the guy that you expect to be in this position. Is that any different from the last section we looked at with the last leader? You remember Zerubbabel, what his name was all about? Zerubbabel's name meant raised in Babylon. not the kind of guy you expect to lead a revolution back home to Jerusalem. He was raised in Babylon, for crying out loud. And so he was kind of depicted, if you remember last time we looked at him, he was depicted as like this new Moses, leading the people out. They plundered the Egyptians. He was, raised up in captivity, but he's going to deliver the people back to their promised land. So then you have Ezra. It looks to me as though Ezra is being portrayed as a new Aaron. Right? He's the priest. He's from the lineage. He's the first one in this new temple. And he is also going to have a lot of Exodus imagery associated with him. So let's look at a couple of these real quick. The first one, look at chapter 7 and verse 9. 7 and verse 9. Now let's back up. Verse 8. And Ezra came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. For on the first day of the 1st month, he began to go up from Babylonia. And on the first day of the 5th month, he came to Jerusalem, for the good hand of his God was on him. Now, throw the brakes on. First of all, 5 months. Or 4 months, 5 months. That's how long it took him to make it home, which is interesting. But what day does he decide to leave Babylonia or Babylon? What might be significant about this day that he is heading out from Babylon? Say it again.
First day of the new year, it'd be Passover.
It'd be Passover. That was when they celebrated Passover. Yeah, the first day of the new year was when the Jews would celebrate Passover. What was Passover about again? What was that major event it was tagged to? Do y'all remember? The Exodus out of Egypt. In fact, Passover, when they did the Passover, that Passover feast and that Passover night was the first day of the 1st month. When that happened, you can go back and read it in Exodus 12, God said, start over. We're starting our counting from today, right? We're gonna reset the calendar, and we're gonna start counting. This will be the first day of the year for you, this day of Passover. So you're gonna start the calendar right here. He says that in Exodus chapter 12. And so then Ezra decides, hey, we're heading back to the promised land. When should we start this journey, he might have thought. How about the first day of Passover? How about we start on this really significant day to our people? I heard someone compare this to a political party. Like, let's say we're forming a new political party, and our launch ceremony is July 4th. Like, are we making a statement there? Are we trying to say something? Say, yeah, we're trying to tell people that our party is going to have the values. It's going to have the backing. It's going to be in line with the things that were established on July 4th, right? It has the weight of July 4th behind it. Ezra's doing the same thing here. He's starting this journey back home, this exodus out of Babylon on the day that Israel exited Egypt. He's trying to bring significance to what he's doing. Ezra, being the author, is trying to show us that what's happening is a big deal. God is keeping his promises. God is doing the thing that he does, where he delivers his people out from oppression and into the promised land. So many of these things, and the significance of this is being built into what Ezra is doing just by when he does it. Any other thoughts on that? Sometimes I only need your thoughts to get a drink, and that's okay. I can do silence. All right, next thing. Look at chapter 8. Chapter 8 and verse 15. We have this weird halt that Ezra has where he stops the party, realizes they don't have any Levites, and he sends back for some Levites. Then, in verse 24, 15 is where he sends for the Levites, and then in verse 24, we're going to pick up and we're going to read. Ezra says, Then I set apart 12 of the leading priests, Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 of their kinsmen with them, and I weighed out to them the silver and gold and the vessels, the offering for the house of our God, all that the king and his counselors and his lords and all Israel their present had offered. Goodness gracious, I got mixed up on the line there. All right, so he weighs out this silver and this gold. Again, this is reminiscent of the plundering because the king sent them with silver and gold on their exodus. So that's another That's another Exodus thing that seems to be happening. And he gathers these Levites and he hands them these sacred vessels. Then in verse 28, I said to them, "You are holy to the Lord, and the vessels are holy, and the silver and the gold are a freewill offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. Guard them and keep them until you weigh them before the chief priests and the Levites and the heads of the fathers' houses in Israel at Jerusalem within the chambers of the house of the Lord." Okay, so Ezra's job for these people is to carry the sacred vessels. You Levites on our Exodus are going to carry the sacred things. This, because we've got Numbers memorized, should automatically drum up Numbers chapter 1. And if it doesn't, then we can just turn over there and look at it. Numbers chapter 1 and verse 50. God says, "But appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony and over all its furnishings and over all that belong to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall take care of it and shall camp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle is set out, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up." So, okay, what was the tabernacle, and how is that related to the temple and these sacred vessels? What's the connection there? Yeah, the tabernacle was the first temple, so to speak. It was the house of God. It was the meeting place between the priests. It was where the sacrifices were made, all of that, right? Which then later is just what they do in the temple. So in a lot of ways, they're the same things. And so in Numbers, in the wilderness, God said the Levites are the ones who carry the sacred things, the temple and the things and the furniture of the temple, the tabernacle. You can't carry the temple, my goodness. You carry the tabernacle, though. You can carry a tent. The things in the tabernacle, the furniture that we talked about, well, I guess it's been a while now since we've talked about it, but the altars and the incense altar and the lampstand, the Levites carry those sacred things. And then we get to Ezra, and he's getting ready to leave, and he says, "You know what? We're going to start this thing on the same night that we left Egypt. And you know what? When we get out there into the wilderness, we're going to have the same people carry those sacred things." Again, what is he doing? He is trying to build significance. He is trying to make a point. This is a new Exodus. We are coming out of captivity. God is doing what he does. God is keeping his promises to us. This is what's happening. And he's making it very, very clear in the writing. We already mentioned that there was support from the royal treasury, that Artaxerxes here funded the trip, which definitely hits on the idea of plundering Egypt. There is this idea of Ezra praying for a straight path. Look at verse 21. He says, "Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before our God, to seek from him a safe journey for ourselves, our children, and all our goods." Does anybody else have something besides safe journey? I've got ESV. Safe journey, safe journey. I think at least New American Standard should have a footnote. Probably the New King James should have a footnote. A straight way. All right. Straight way should immediately, he will make their path straight. All right. Like we've got a category for that language. What's Ezra asking for here? What is he using? He's using imagery from certainly from Isaiah 40, as well as probably some other Psalms, that God is going to give them provision. So when he's praying to God here, he's using language that describes God leading the people. When was the first time God led the people? It was the Exodus. It was the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. God leading the people out and making their way in the wilderness.
Was meant that all the stones and everything would be moved out of the way. There would be no tripping, no hazards to the, it's not physical, but it's meaning
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
not
yeah.
gonna be any obstacles for
Well,
them
there
to-
certainly wasn't a straight path the first Exodus, right? I mean, how long did they take that 11-day journey? 40 years or something. It's like, that's not straight. You know, like they didn't take a literal straight path, but God was providing for them in the wilderness. He gave them water, he gave them manna, he took care of their enemies. I mean, that was the point, like you're saying, is not a literal direct path, efficiency, but provision. And that's what Ezra, it matches very well with what Ezra is asking for in this part of the story, because he's asking for God's provision instead of using the king's provision, which again should bring up some other stuff about how Solomon made political marriages and relied on other nations to protect Israel, as well as several of the other kings tried to have the nations protect them rather than God protect them. All of this is language of a guy who's really trying to do it right. That's what I'm trying to point out here, and a lot of it is tagged to the Exodus. Tim, and then we'll go to Kim.
Good question, though. So you also have the symbolism of the reverse plundering of Babylon too, right? Because Babylon came in and plundered the temple.
Yeah.
And then you also have that double entendre, I guess.
But they sent a lot of stuff back already, 50 years before.
They did. Okay, and that's a really important note. They sent, there was the neighbors that sent a lot of stuff back, and then they sent some of the temple stuff back 50 years ago, and now they're sending, again, more sacred stuff back. So, man, that just makes you wonder, okay, did they not send it all the first time? Is this more leaning us towards the plundering of Babylon, that this is Babylon's sacred stuff that they're going to go and use to repurpose for God's temple? We're not given specific details, right? But the details we are given definitely point to the idea that this is an exodus or a new exodus happening. So that's definitely a good note and a really good detail to find. Kim?
I was just going to say, my translation says the right way.
The right way, yeah. The right way, I think the Hebrew is literally a straight way, or make a straight path. But the right way is an interpretive translation. Yeah,
Straight
yeah.
way.
Don't let us go the wrong way into the hands of our enemies, but the right way into the promised land. I think that's a great, totally reasonable translation of that. Any other thoughts? Move on to the next. Yes.
They fasted so that they could humble themselves, so that they could stay focused on that straight way.
Yeah.
So it's clearly that, in that context there, that there's something that needs to be done in order for us to be able to focus in on that straight, because we can get off that path when we get outside of being humble with God.
Yeah, the humility is really significant, and the fasting is kind of an outward showing of that humility, right? And I think that's significant. I hope this summer we have somebody talk about that, because I think there's a theme of that runs through the scripture that's really, really meaningful. But definitely, and actually that fast is the thing that we're going to next. Go ahead, Katie.
With the gathering things for the temple, it also, shows that it's not like they took what they could find and then okay, well, that's all, Babylon continued to let them take things for the temple. It wasn't nope, we already, you take stuff 50 years ago, make
Yeah,
that
it's
work.
abnormal behavior.
They were
for sure.
yeah, take more gold.
Yeah, it's abnormal behavior. Even historically, the empire at this point wanted to make sure that, I think it's the Persians who were in charge at this point, wanted to, this was the sentiment, was if we let these people go back home and we let them do their thing in their homeland, maybe they won't be as mad at us when we tax them really heavily. And maybe our empire will last longer without uprising. And that, historically, you can see the Persians actually did this. They let a lot of people groups go back home, and that seems to be their motivation. However, even in that context, it's very strange to send them with their holy things and then some more holy things. All right, this is abnormal behavior, and I think it points to the fact that God was working, just like he was back when Zerubbabel left, and it talked about how God was bringing the people up out of Babylon. And again, that language actually is found here too, in this story of Ezra. Okay, the 3-day rest at the end of chapter 8. Look at 8 and verse, I think it's 31 or 32. Let's start in 31. It says, "Then we departed from the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was on us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambushes by the way." There's just a lot of stories in there, apparently, in these 5 months. Verse 32, "We came to Jerusalem, and there we remained 3 days. On the 4th day, within the house of our God, the silver and gold and the vessels were weighed into the hands of Meremoth the priest, the son of Uriah, and with him was Eleazar the son of Phinehas, and with them were the Levites, Jozabad the son of Jeshua, and Noadiah the son of Binnui. The whole was counted and weighed, and the weight of everything was recorded." Okay, so they end up heading into this land, and when they finally end up getting there, they wait 3 days, which I think is interesting. They get to Jerusalem, and then they stop for 3 days. Then they go in and they weigh these precious metals and these sacred things. This 3-day rest definitely is pointing back to Joshua and the Israelites. If you remember back in Joshua, I think it's chapter 3, when they cross over the Jordan. I shouldn't say cross over, when they walk through the Jordan on dry ground, which mirrors the Red Sea crossing. When they cross through the Jordan on dry ground, they get into the Promised Land, right? The Jordan River was the barrier of the Promised Land. And so they get into the Promised Land, and after that, there's this little detail that they rested for 3 days after they got into the Promised Land. Once again, this is just more imagery. This is more emphasis and meaning behind what Ezra is doing. This is the new Exodus. This is God doing what he does and God keeping his promises. There's also at least one other thing. We're kind of running out of time. We're entirely running out of time. All the fun stuff is going to be next week, I think. There's this one other detail where Ezra appoints judges and leaders who sort of rule over, he sort of delegates responsibility in chapter 7, which is reminiscent of Moses appointing leaders or delegating leaders when his father-in-law Jethro gives him that advice in Exodus 18. Again, more Exodus imagery. There's also, I mentioned how Ezra doesn't seem to be the guy doing things, but he's the guy getting ideas from people. Like that to me looks very Exodus-like as well. Aaron was supposed to be the mouthpiece for Moses, but then he didn't end up doing as much of the speaking. That looks very similar to the story of Ezra here. Okay, we're getting to the climax. We're getting to the conflict here, which is this intermarrying and this divorce decree. We're going to play the same game that we played last time, okay? Did Ezra do the right thing? What happened here? Is this mass divorce the right choice? Are their motivations reasonable? Are they right? Are they wrong? This is really what this whole story is kind of leading to. You've got this new Exodus, and everything is going well. He is the right guy. They are doing the right things. They leave on the right day. They have the right people carrying the right stuff. They get to the temple, and they have this 3-day rest, just like Joshua, and everything is looking right. And then this bomb gets dropped right on Ezra's lap. And let's read it in chapter 9 and verse 1. After these things had been done, the officials approached me, Ezra, and said, "The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the peoples of the lands with their abominations from the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites, for they have taken some of their daughters to be wives for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy race has mixed itself with the peoples of the lands. And in this faithlessness, the hand of the officials and the chief men has been foremost." Ezra's response: "As soon as I heard this, I tore my garment and my cloak and pulled my hair from my head and beard and sat appalled." All right. So Ezra takes this really seriously, and he begins to pull his own hair out, which isn't the first time isn't the last time that's going to happen in the Ezra Nehemiah book, actually. So after this, we've already talked about it, but they essentially come up with this idea to divorce all of these foreign wives. And that's pretty much where the book ends in terms of narrative. Was this the right choice? Was it the wrong choice? Was Ezra's reaction to this appropriate? Was it inappropriate? What are some things in the story that point us one way or the other? We got 5 minutes. Let's see where we go. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, in chapter 10, he prays to God about this and wants to make a covenant with God, and they're trying to, he says, and those who tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. So they're trying to
Which
follow.
verse is this?
That's chapter 10, verse 3.
3. Gotcha.
Yeah, so they're trying to put away everything that they were not doing right and trying to follow the law.
Yeah, let it be done
So-
according to the law. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that begs the question, what part, right? Where's the decree in the law that says you cannot marry any foreign women, or if you marry foreign women, you must divorce them? Okay, because you're... Okay, okay. Yeah, it was part of the conquest and coming into the land significantly. I mean, but even that. No. Yeah, his instructions were often wipe out all the people, right? Then we have these really pesky stories that show up that make that a more complicated thing, like Rahab, who was a foreign woman and was married into the Israelites and then was used in the lineage of Jesus. If you go back in Genesis and Exodus, can you think of any other foreign wives in the story of the Bible? Let's do this. Ruth and Boaz, definitely, really obvious. She was a foreign wife, and that is, by all accounts, viewed as the right choice for Boaz to have done that. And she's included in Jesus' genealogy as well in Matthew. Kim, did you have one?
Well, it says in Deuteronomy 7, nor shall you make any marriages with them, before. You shall make no covenant with them, talking about the foreign people of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Nor shall you make any marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son.
Yep.
That's in Deuteronomy 7.
Sure, yeah. This is Moses as they're entering into the promised land, and the expectation and the thing that they're going to do, that we know that they did, is to wipe out these people and take over, conquer the land, for sure. Any other foreign women in the Torah, in the law, that were married?
I know Judah married his, had relations with his daughter-in-law, and I never understood whether she was a foreign lady or not.
She was a Canaanite, Tamar. Judah and Tamar, that really uncomfortable story that we don't tell kids, was Tamar was a Canaanite woman. Mm-hmm. Yep. Was a Midianite, yeah. Yeah. Her father was the high priest of Midian. So he didn't just marry a foreign woman, he married a foreign preacher's daughter, right? Like, yeah. Okay. It's actually in the law. Like, this is what we need to remember when we're reading back through this. The law, as these people understand it, as the Jews have traditionally kept it, is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You ask anyone, any Jew at this time period or even today, that's the law. That's the Torah. And anytime it talks about the law in the Bible is referring to the law, it's referring to those first 5 books. So we might chronologically look at it and say, well, Genesis was before the law, but actually Genesis is the law, right? Which is really significant to remember. We are
Not written down until Moses,
yeah.
is the way I look at it.
Well, possibly.
Because people knew how to sacrifice to it, at Cain and Abel.
This is bringing up a lot of really fun questions. Yeah, okay, Cain and Abel are making sacrifices. Noah's making sacrifices. Abraham's building altars. There's something going on within the law that is maybe not the way that we think of law code. And we've talked about this in a couple different ways, but we have to put a pin in it because we're out of time. And Katie, did you have another foreign wife?
The earlier question about Ezra's reaction, I feel like everything we say points to Ezra having the correct reaction.
Okay.
Because he's being brought this thing, and it's so complicated and messy when you look at, well, what does the law say?
Mm-hmm.
The law says this, but it also says that, and it's very conflicting on when is it, and there's not a clear cut, this or that, because it's like, well, these people were married to foreign wives, and it was the right thing to do. But then we're also told not to. So I feel like that level of distress that he has.
Yeah, well,
It's
so the
reasonable.
distress, I hear what you're saying, and I think that means that we have set the table for next week really well, because that was my goal. Let's muddy the waters a little bit and dig into this conversation. Like we've talked about, it's what this text is meant for. It is meant to transform you by wrestling with it and engaging with it, not just inform you about things that happened in the world. It is trying to change your heart. So when we engage, when we ask questions, when we ask, notice little detail, this is all part of the Bible impacting and changing us. So that's what we're going to do next week. Hopefully this will be a lot of fun.
Can I just ask one?
Sure.
Just a quick question, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Listen, people have gone long on
It's
Wednesday
so
nights
right
before.
outside. So the ESV doesn't say, and they divorced their wives, they said they put them out. So are we assuming that the phrase put them out is
Yeah,
divorcing it?
yeah, it would be the same. To put away your wife would be a euphemistic way of saying the same thing. So, yes, all right. So we'll pick up here next week. I think there are a couple more foreign wives we can talk about, and then we will ask the same question. Thank you, guys.